And your attendance tonight, whether it's in person or online, it tells me how important your children are to you. By the way, how many of you are parents of adolescents? Do you mind raising your hands? I am so sorry. Of course, I don't really mean that. But you know, anybody remember growing up in a house where there was one telephone and it was on the wall and there was actually a cord on it? Think about how much our lives have changed. All those years ago when I came home from school and if somebody called me, my mom would answer. It seemed like she sat next to that phone my entire adolescence. She would hand me the phone. I mean, she would move. Was I on the phone with anyone in the middle of the night? Was it interrupting my sleep, for example? So there are a lot of concerns, and we can begin with all the things to worry about in this world. There's a lot. We've got a war in the Middle East. We've got a war in Eastern Europe. We have political polarization beyond anything I've seen in my lifetime. We have global warming. We lost more than a million Americans in a pandemic. There's a lot. And then we add the screen age and all the things that impact our children. So tonight I plan to talk for about an hour. I'll answer some questions from all of you. I'll stay behind if some of you have individual questions. If questions don't get answered, if you'll share those with the administration, I will answer them and we'll post those. We're not going to solve all this tonight, but I hope to go over a few things that will be helpful to you. You probably are aware that the American Academy of Pediatrics says every kid over the age of 8 needs to be screened for anxiety. And literally decades ago, they said every teenager in this country needs to be screened for depression. Tonight, we will talk about all of those things. I will mention the word suicide. You know, when I was 25, my dad died by suicide. If you lost a loved one, a relative, a friend to suicide, I think a good idea what it's possible. But I believe strongly in prevention. And I'm going to quote our Surgeon General, who said, we got to talk about suicide prevention more in our schools, in our homes, in the workplace, and in places of worship. And so we'll talk tonight about the warning signs of depression and suicide. We're going to talk about the extent of the time that young people spend on their screens. And I gave one of these presentations locally a couple weeks ago, and I talked about the recommendation from all the medical associations, which are like no more than 2 hours a day for an adolescent. No screen time for a kid under 2. No more than an hour for like an elementary age child per day. And the parents are all aware that particularly the teenagers might be online almost constantly 6 to 8 hours. And they're asking me, I mean, what do we do? These recommendations are so dramatically different from the reality. And some of you tonight told me you have like preschool or kindergarten. And maybe the simplest message is do not be in a hurry about all of this. In fact, you know, we actually have 20 grandchildren. We're now expecting 21. Our son is now expecting number 9. Somebody please tell him to stop. And yes, I can name all of them if you give me a moment. Probably get all the grades right, but it's a lot. Okay? All right, moving on. So a lot of concerns about technology starting to really consume the lives of our children. And there's so many wonderful things about all that technology, but it's, how do we balance that? How do we balance that in our lives and be a good model for them? So those are the goals tonight. And in particular, I'm a big believer in listening to children. And I've often had to go places after extreme tragedies. Sad to tell you, I've been on the site of 17 different school shootings. I've responded to many youth suicide point busters. And my favorite thing is always to talk to kids and ask, what do you need? And I remember a kid in Montana saying, you know, I can tell when my mom isn't really listening to me. So already told me what I should do. I haven't even finished telling her everything I want to say. And our son, and by the way, there are 4 children. It's a blended marriage, but we like to refer to them as all ours. But you'll hear most of the examples from Jeremy. He was the oldest, although I have examples for all of them, but probably don't have time for that tonight. But the bottom line is that Jeremy loved basketball. And the important point is he picked basketball. Do I like sports? Yes. But I wanted him to pick things he wanted to do. You know, I could actually still hear him dribbling 2 balls in the kitchen. We got the goal, we put it inside, we put a goal outside, we put lights out in the driveway. And Jeremy would say to me, Dad, will you read done? No matter how tired I was, I'd get up off the couch, I'd go out there, flip on the lights. I'm not saying a word. He's relaxed, something he really enjoys. He's shooting baskets. All I do is a nice chest pass back. Pretty soon he's telling me all these things I want to know about because I'm his dad. And I would respond with something really insightful. Based on that years of graduate study in psychology with my best, That's the hard one, son. What are you thinking? No kid wants you to say, do this, do that. They want you to just truly listen to what they're going through. You have to find that shared time when your kid will talk to you. Maybe it's cooking dinner. Maybe it's driving to a mall. And with Jill, you know, when she would say that she wanted to have a friend come over, I didn't care how far away her friend lived. And I always wanted them to come to our house because then I knew a lot more about what was going on. And in the 45-minute drive across Houston to pick up her friend, Jill talked a lot. I listened. And we'd pick up her friend, they'd hop in the back. I said nothing. They talked a lot. I listened. So it's really important to find those shared times when your kid will truly talk to you. Now, I read a book in preparation for today, and Jonathan Haidt said a lot of things that I've been believing for 40 years. The book is called The Anxious Generation. He's saying, we went from a play-based childhood, where everybody went outside and played, to a phone-based childhood. And he also says, some of this was driven by, we had this concern about danger out there in the real world, and so we started supervising everything, and then pretty soon, kids are inside because they have this incredible new device that is like so entertaining. And I think he's made some excellent points, and I highly recommend the book, although I'll cover the main point. My rule of thumb, especially for a kid that's out of preschool, if we just think in terms of 10 minutes a day. So if they're 17, all right, that's 170 minutes. That's almost 3 hours. It's still less than half what the Center for Disease Control says is the average. So you're just trying to figure this out. And of course, I spoke to some high school kids in Montana last month. All right, I'm clearly an old guy. They're growing up in a world that certainly was so different from mine. So what can we really say to an adolescent that has pattern of spending so much time online? Really, just a couple of questions and then we listen. Do you ever feel like you're missing anything you'd like to do more of because of all your time with your screens? What are we hoping they come up with? Well, I may not be getting enough sleep. You know, I'd kind of like to exercise more. I'm not spending enough time in person with my friends. So we hope they come up with those things. It wasn't too long ago I spoke in a suburb of Atlanta to a lot of parents, and I made this recommendation. Tell your adolescents, 10:30, time to go to bed now. Hand me all your screens, and I'll hand them back to you in the morning, and they'll all be charged. Well, a mom comes up, and she says, but what if my daughter's friends needed to talk to her in the middle of the night? They would not be able to reach her. Well, if something is so serious, maybe your daughter's friends should contact their own parents, right? But you know, I didn't convince her. She went away believing strongly that her daughter needed to be available to her 8th grade friend every moment of the night. Research says adolescent girls, about 30% of them wake up in the middle of the night to see who might have posted something about them. So the simplest thing in the world would be no screens in the bedroom. Then that brings up the question of bedrooms, okay? When we make the bedroom, the kid has every device known to man in the bedroom, why are they coming out? Well, Jennifer made dinner. But watch them try to take that plate of food and go back and eat it in isolation. And you know what will a mom say to me? I know the value of a technology-free mealtime, but it's my husband. He won't put down the screens even for 30 minutes while we have dinner. So just some simple things in our families. And maybe the real recommendation is just have a meeting with your kids and talk about technology and come up with a plan that fits your family. So there's a legislative movement that we're going to start to outlaw. Maybe some of the social media sites, we might try to say you have to be at least 16 and you got to prove that. I mean, in general, I support those concepts, but I really think it's up to you and it's up to your family to have these discussions about what is reasonable, what is healthy, what is good for everyone in our family. So the Surgeon General put out a couple of advisories in the last couple of years. Sadly, I think they were largely ignored. One of them was on protecting the mental health of our youth, and they followed that up with one about social media. So what did the Surgeon General's advisory about social media say? It's wreaking havoc with our children's lives. Make them think they're not smart enough, they're not rich enough, they're not good enough. And it affects girls more than boys. So I encourage you to look at some of those recommendations, and I'll try to highlight a few of them today. Now, where my wife and I worked, we had a lot of students, 100,000 students. That's probably a little bit hard for you to grasp for the school district. I was the go-to guy after every crisis for 24 years, whether I wanted to be or not. And what I got the most frustrated by was going into a classroom one day after a car accident and basic things about no drinking and driving, not using the phone in the car. Do you see that word up there? Don't be intoxicated. Pretty clever. But, you know, if we're on our phone while we're driving, if we're texting, why would we not expect our teenagers to do exactly the same thing? So, very important to modeling and paying attention. In fact, I want to make an analogy here. When your kid is learning to drive, I know you all take that very seriously. And you're going to be side by side with them, maybe giving them a little too much advice, but you're watching every single thing they're doing. Well, I'd like to suggest to you that you approach social media, the internet, smartphones, all of that with the same seriousness and the concept of being side by side with them as they learn to navigate that online world out there. Now, you've already noticed up here a couple things that are pretty disturbing. For my entire life up until 2 years ago, number one cause of death for a kid in America is car accident. For the last couple of years, it's gun death. And that's including homicide. It's including accidental deaths with the gun. It's including suicide. And at the simplest level, and I try to choose my words carefully, I'm never going to question an adult's right to own a gun. I'm just going to say, with that right comes a responsibility to safeguard that gun from a troubled, angry, impulsive, depressed, maybe even mentally ill person that resides in your very own home. So here's the bottom line. Schools are the safest places your children go. Now, one shooting in a school in America is unacceptable. We got to work on gun violence as a public health problem in America. You know what my greatest worry is about those 20 precious grandchildren? One of them be in the wrong place at the wrong time, bowling alley, grocery store, concert. So we need to approach safety really everywhere in our society. And we need to know the graduated driving laws, and I should have looked them up for Georgia. I didn't. I know what they are in Florida. The first 6 months, you're not supposed to drive after dark. First 6 months, you're not supposed to have anybody in the car under the age of 21. So most parents in Florida don't know those. They don't enforce those. paying attention and really taking charge. And that's kind of a theme for tonight. Take charge of the technology too. It is a privilege. It's not a right. But unfortunately, in many of the cases I know well, it's like kids feel like that is their right. And who is the parent to try to question or get involved or even know what's happening? So, and maybe the answer is, of course, starting with younger children. Self-care, what is it? Self-care is kind of the basis of being able to manage the ups and downs in our life. And during the pandemic, if you don't mind one particular personal story, so during the pandemic, Donna had retired as a school principal. So why'd she retire? Spend time with all those grandchildren. None of them lived close by, couldn't fly anywhere, concerned about all the spread of the virus. You know what I could tell? My own wife is depressed, okay? So we bought a house. I kept her busy. She was going over there like every day, helping a contractor, running errands. Amazing how many things were bought that weren't right. We gotta go back. That kept her busy for like 6 weeks. She's still depressed. So I did what a lot of families did. I bought her a puppy. Do you have any idea what a little fluffy designer puppy cost in Miami at the height of the pandemic? I mean, Kathy did wonders. But I bought cars for a lot less money. So we need to realize that self-care, and I'll be a little bit more about that in a moment, is really important for all of us. And I came up with this little model. And the first time I did a webinar for the university on self-care, we broke the bank. I mean, we couldn't handle the number of people that wanted to watch that webinar. And every letter up there stands for something. Of course, the C is we want everybody to stay calm, but what can I control? Which is largely my reaction to what's going on. And children do the best with consistency and routine. And what's the A stand for? Being alert for the behavioral changes for our loved ones and always being available to listen to them. So that's the L. And by the way, of course, we're going to make these slides available to you. And I think the L also has to stand for limiting television viewing of horrific images, especially when we have small children. And the M is, of course, the modeling that we do of managing everything going on in our life. There's a quote out there, I won't get it quite right from Emerson, but it's literally like, your children are watching everything you do and how you interact in every single setting. So that modeling is important, as is the management in your home. So in today's world, it's not enough to know your kid's friends. You got to know your kid's friends' parents. And everything I know about the school and community, I'm very impressed by. Frankly, I wish every kid in America could go to a school like this. So it's going to be a little easier for you to know the families and to be able to connect, which is very important for so many things that we are going to talk about tonight. And as a crisis responder, primarily I listen. But at some point, I always will ask a simple question. Who or what has helped you before? If you've ever had to deal with something traumatic, who or what can help you now? It's important for your children to also know what support is around them. And resiliency. You know what the keys to resiliency are for all of us? Resiliency is a learned behavior bouncing back from adversity. When we're surrounded by loving and caring family and friends, we do better. When we're given opportunities to vent strong emotions, we do better. When we use problem-solving skills and we're optimistic about the future, we do better. And those are all the things that we can model. And it was nice of Kara to say, yes, I did get the Hoping the Parkland Heal Award. And, still helping. It's been now 6 years. But what's been the message consistently to the Parkland parents when a kid lives in a stable home? when they're shown unconditional love every day, every way, that kid can overcome almost anything. But unfortunately, a lot of kids don't live in a stable home. Some kids feel like they're in the middle every day, every way, if there's been a divorce. Now, my first wife of the 6, just kidding. My first wife of the 2, she's a psychologist. We met her. You don't talk badly about me, I won't talk badly about you. And we never have. But in my career, I've known so many young people that feel in the middle every day, every way. They're like the messengers. So whatever's going on, I think parents need to realize something. You brought those children into this world together. You need to be partners forever in raising them. And whatever we can do so that there's a little more communication and harmony is very, very important. Okay, so anything up there, I've talked about quite a bit of that, but I want to give one more example. I'm a really big believer that dads should do half or more of everything that has to do with child care. I remember talking to Jeremy about this when he had his first child, and I'm actually very proud of it because you name it, he does it, guy. He'll sometimes call with the small one on his hip while he's making the dinner, and he bought all the groceries. Okay. So, but when he was like 3, we're in the grocery store, I'm picking out bananas, and I hear this little voice say, "Dad, am I the boy you always wanted?" That gave me the chance to say, "Absolutely, you are." And there is a simple request that I have for you. When you go home tonight, I want you to tell your daughter, some of you have twins, you have a high school student, whatever their age, I want you to tell them they're the sons and daughters you always dreamed of having. And I had a dad in Montana who came up to me and said, I don't know, my kid's a senior in high school, I don't think he wants to hear me say that. And I'm like, believe me, Dad, you will want to hear that. And I made the dad promise. Just send me a text tomorrow. Take down my phone number. Tell me how that went. And he came back with a text the next day saying to his dad that his son truly appreciated his dad saying that. And in these sessions, I've had people say, I texted my daughter. She's away at college. And she texted back, you're the mom I always dreamed of. So we really need to let more people know about that. And I have one more example about Jeremy. What do you think? Son, I need to talk to you a little bit more about the death of your grandfather. He said, I'm sorry, I never met the man, but he died long before I was born, but you told me he had a heart attack. Well, there's a little more to the story, Jeremy. I want you to know that from me, never from someone else. 2 weeks after his heart attack, your grandfather shot himself. The word is suicide. After you're 8, maybe you can understand that. Then he thinks a minute. Then he looks up and says, oh, Dad, you shouldn't feel guilty. Oh, why is that? Well, your dad wasn't a psychologist like mine. He didn't teach you all the things I know about how important it is to feel good about yourself. I mean, Dad, every kid has problems. You just have to know to go to an adult for help and to always believe whatever comes along, you'll get help and you'll get through it. Now, wasn't that sweet that he was trying to alleviate my guilt? What's the most important point there? He's 8 years old. He's a problem solver. He knows to go to adults for help. And here's another simple request. Ask your kids, who's your trusted go-to adult at school? And I'm pretty sure that every one of your kids are going to come up with names and even multiple names. But near us is a high school of 5,500. And somehow I don't think all those students are going to so quickly say, it's Coach Finkel or it's my English teacher, Miss Anderson. But ask them. And then ask a simple question. What might be the situation when you should not hesitate and really go to that trusted adult and have that conversation with them and ask them to identify those trusted adults? And every kid makes mistakes. One last example. Okay? I've never been a believer in physical punishment. Jeremy was like 3. He is like shaking a huge floor lamp. Okay? And pick him up. He looks at me and he says, "Time out." And I nodded. And I carried him to his room, gently set him down, put him in his room and started to close the door. But he's angry. He grabs the doorknob and he throws that door open. And I see the doorknob go through the wall. Now, maybe I'm an okay psychologist. I'm a very rousing account. Anything breaks at our house, I'm going to be like, I'll make dinner. You take a look at the garage door. Okay. So when I saw that go through the wall, I'm angry. I mean, I want to grab him. I want to shake him. I want to yell at him. I don't do any of those things. I go to the other end of the house. When I come back, I'm calm. I have a simple question. Jeremy, how are you going to fix the hole you just put in the wall? He looks at me. He doesn't know. And he starts crying. I said, Jeremy, grab your piggy bank. We went to Ace Hardware. Jeremy paid for the materials, and I made him help fix it. It didn't look very good when we were done. The important point was that he paid for that repair. When I get really concerned with kids is when they break something, they don't try to fix it, they hurt people's feelings, they don't apologize. Restitution is incredibly important. And I remember I worked in a special school, and the kid at the high school was angry and through the principal's door, just slammed it shut, like kind of breaking the door frame. It was going to be like a $175 repair. So now we're sitting down with the parents, and basically we're saying, your son needs to pay for this repair. He said, well, we don't have any money. He doesn't have any money. Okay, well, he's going to be staying after school every day and helping custodian for X number of hours, and he will work that off. Well, they turned it into their homeowner's insurance. And we got a check. That wasn't what we wanted. But it's like, you need to let kids, hey, I'll make mistakes. The other thing, of course, is that their worth as a person should never be in question. I've never called any one of them a name ever, and I never will. I will point out, I am disappointed about this. This was a poor choice. But your worth as a person, my love for you will never, ever be in question. What are their typical reactions to traumatic events? They regress academically, behaviorally, they have nightmares, sleeping problems, worries about the future. Those aren't the unusual ones. Those are the pretty much every single time. We already talked about routine. That's very important. If I was sitting there tonight, I'd want to know what protects our children from the World Health Organization. We've already gone through that. We talked about a few of those. Having good friendships is important. Connections in school, problem-solving skills, lack of access to lethal means, access to mental health care, religious involvement, the mosque, the temple, the church. Those are all very important places for kids to connect. And I know this is a school that really promotes help-seeking and well-being for students. I hope that you glance at that. You're thinking about all of those that are in place for your child. I'm actually a really big believer in extracurricular activities, but I have seen two ends of the spectrum. The reality is most kids in America have zero extracurricular activities because it's one parent, they don't have the money, there's transportation, they work nights, whatever it is the kid wants to do, they can't make it happen. But the other end of the spectrum are kids that have so many extracurricular activities that those actually cause them stress. I always suggest this. How about one activity a season? And we'll make that happen. Don't you want your kid's life to revolve around you and your family as long as possible? Believe me, they're going to be out of that house and gone, and they're going to be turning like 38 years old, our youngest one, before you know it. So try to keep in balance the extracurricular activities. Moving on again, there may be a bit of a reality gap between what you think is going on in the life of your adolescent and what truly is happening out there. There's some literature talking about adolescents leading secret lives that have to do with sex, drugs, and reckless behavior. So I'm trying to encourage you to be empowered, absolutely know what's going on. I still remember the first high school party Joe went to. And I'm like, I need information here, Joe. I'm not going to drop you off at somebody's house. Give me a phone number. I'm going to call, and I'm going to get information. And when I take you to that party, I'm going to walk in the house, introduce myself, and ask a few questions. And the longest time went by. And I finally went to her and said, what about this party you want to go to? She says, oh, Dad, I decided not to go. Something was happening there. Then there, remember the end of 8th grade party? We agreed 25 guests, Jill. That's about all our house can really accommodate. And I went a list of the 25 kids that are going to be invited to the party. And clearly, if somebody can't come, we're going to have a number less than 25, right? Okay. So at one point, Donna counted the shoes because we had new carpeting. There were 48 pairs of shoes. By the way, how many parents do you think called in advance and asked the kind of questions I'm encouraging you to ask? One. How many parents came to the door? One. Sir, I could really use some help. Come on in here. He was not interested. You know the saddest thing? She didn't enjoy it. She was trying to guard things in her house. Things were broken. Things were stolen. And I would argue, I think individually they were probably all pretty good kids, but 48 of them, lots of things happened that weren't the best. So maybe some of those examples will help you. Okay, pretty well covered that one. So we're going to move on a little more quickly. So this is from Jonathan Haidt. And as you glance at that, you're going to give them something that's going to interfere with their sleep, make them not feel so good about themselves, get less exercise, spend less time in person with others. So do you see what he's saying there? It's like, it needs to be said. It's something you have to give a lot of thought to. Of course, every kid in the world is going to say, every other 7th grader has a smartphone, right? So what could be a response? What could your community do? There's a website, an organization out there called Wait Until 8th Grade. And what's really great about that organization is it connects you with like-minded other parents. You could start that. And then you'd be able to say, well, as a matter of fact, Beverly's family is waiting until 8th grade. And I was in Houston not long ago, and we were having dinner with friends, and they had like an 8-year-old kid. And I saw this like really big clunky watch. I knew exactly what that watch was. Because you can buy a watch that allows your kid to make 5 calls. To you, to grandma, grandpa, 911. They don't really need a $1,000 phone to be able to reach you. So, and then private schools that I have visited, kids pull up in the morning if they're a small child. Typically somebody is opening the door and escorting them into school. And then they put the kid back in your car to leave this campus. So why should your kid need a phone at all? Because typically elementary kids in private schools, an adult is with them like every single moment of the day. So just food for thought, and of course the Wait Until 8th Grade website, we'll come to that in a few moments. Pretty well covered that one. And maybe I wish we could go back to simpler times in some way. And that's the question to ask them, because if they're in a certain pattern, they've been used to this really unsupervised, extensive screen time for years, I mean, that is not going to change overnight. But if we just have conversations about, are you missing out on some things? Do how do you feel after you spend so much time on social media? And of course, they're always going to say that it's about the homework. But if you actually know how much the homework assignment is for tonight, how much it should take, then they can't really be telling you, oh, I needed 4 hours on my screen time this evening because of the homework. All right, let's see if there's anything else up there that I've not really talked about. There are a lot of programs out there to help you, and I'm sure the OIT personnel at the school is very familiar with those programs and can direct you to some that I don't even know about. But it's like start researching and asking for help to get a little bit more control of this. And you pay for the phone, you pay for the cable internet access, you have the right to know what's going on. And I remember going and talking to 6th grade parents. And towards the end of the session, I almost wanted them to stand up and repeat after me. I am your parent. My happiness cannot depend on whether or not my 11-year-old likes me right now. I thought, okay, they won't like that, that'll be too much, okay, so I didn't do that. And then the principal called me, and she said, you know, the parents really like what you have to say. They want you to come back to the school. I said, why would I come back to the school? They already heard my opinion. They want you to tell their 6th graders why they're going to change a few things. And somehow I'm thinking they missed the entire message. Okay, moving on. So we're going to talk a little bit about depression and anxiety. And we've got to get over the stigma in this country that stops people from getting help. And there are evidence-based treatments out there. I mean, we just need to figure out a way that it's more accepted to get mental health treatment and it's more accessible to everybody. And a dad of a senior the other day said to me, I mean, how do I really tell that my daughter's depressed? I mean, she's a senior. She's moody. She's irritable. She's withdrawing from all of us. Well, let me ask you a couple questions, Dad. Has this gone on for 2 or 3 or more weeks in a row? Yes, it has. Has she dropped out of things that were previously pleasurable? As a matter of fact, she did. She was on that dance team for years, but this year I couldn't believe it. She said, I don't care about dance anymore. Dad, is this pervasive? Is this affecting home, school, friends, pretty much everything? Yes, it is. Sounds like you've got a depressed teenager. About 20% of teenagers suffer from depression at some point during those tumultuous teenage years. About 80% roughly receive no treatment whatsoever. So look for things. Is it pervasive? Is it affecting pretty much everything? It's gone on for several weeks in a row, and they've dropped out of what was previously something they really enjoyed. And here are the general signs of distress for young people. Changes in sleeping habits, somatic complaints. A big concern is when they want to stop going to school, and everything about that means we've got to nip that in the bud and not let kids go days and days or weeks without going to school. So changes in energy level, changes in eating, all of those are part of this. Don't be afraid to talk to them about mental health issues, about anxiety, about depression, about hopelessness, about thoughts of suicide. One of my favorite phrases is circle of care around children. That's so wonderful about private schools, smaller schools. So those connections. And the nurse. The nurse knows the student. Talk to the teacher, the parents involved, the assistant principal. Everybody is basically circling up and working together to support that. So, Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey. Been done every 2 years for more than 30 years by the Center for Disease Control. By the way, they survey high school students on every at-risk behavior you can possibly think of. Do they wear seatbelts? Do they use tobacco products? Do they use drugs? Have they ever felt safe at school? I mean, if they felt unsafe at school, do they get bullied at school? Do they get bullied away from school? If you're a parent of a high school student, I'd encourage you to look at all of those. Now, I'm only zeroing in on those that have to do with depression and suicide. These are the highest figures in 30 years. And have you already noted that Georgia is actually above the national average on some of those dimensions? But think about it. 43% of high school students in Georgia say I felt sad or hopeless 2 or 3 or more weeks in a row during the last 12 months. 15.6% made a suicide attempt in the last 12 months. What's really scary is most of the time the parents had no idea. School doesn't know either. Who knows all about it? That would be their friends. But did they realize that's when you go to that trusted adult to get help for your friend? And middle schoolers in Georgia were not surveyed. But some states survey the middle schoolers, and those results are equally alarming. However, middle schoolers aren't asked about the last 12 months. They're asked about their lifetime. And I'd be remiss today not to have those up. Dramatic changes of behavior, making out a will, talking about suicide, researching suicide, giving away prized possession. And in particular with adolescents, we're zeroing in on sleep deprivation and just being overwhelmed. I think I could argue pretty convincingly it's a difficult time to be a kid. There's more competition and pressure to get into just the right schools. And by the way, I wish I could tell you that it always goes just like this, a nice trajectory for every kid. You know, I guess I'm an example of somebody who struggled. You know what my senior English teacher said to me? Scott, you'll be wasting your parents' money if you even attempt to go to college. I actually got kicked out next for poor scholarship. All I can tell you is I would have been a really bad accountant. Maybe it turned out okay. So you need to be patient, and you need to just always be there for them, and realize it's not going to go perfectly for all of them. There will be some struggles. And they take a while before they find themselves. And when they do, though, I'm sure they will be quite successful. So I'd be remiss today not to talk about 988. It's there for all of us every moment of the day. The crisis text line. And when we interview students for our doctoral program, and one of them says, you know, I volunteered at the crisis line, like, you're in, okay? You know what I'm always wanting to ask young people? Try to find out what they're doing that they don't have to do. Volunteer work. We were just talking about volunteer work. Here's my favorite quote about an adolescent. Perhaps the only way they can find themselves is through service to other people. You know what they actually learn? Guess what? The world does not revolve around you. And that little upset you're having with your 13-year-old friend, you can kind of put that in perspective when you actually volunteer and see how much some people in this world are actually struggling. So I mentioned self-care earlier. Let me quickly go through. Where does it come from? Well, for your kids, it comes from school. It comes from family. They get tired, stressed out. They need self-care. There's a physical side to this, which has to do with diet, exercise, proper rest. There's a mental side. And it's so important we all find our creative outlet. Maybe that's artwork, maybe that's journaling, maybe it's gardening, but find some way that we can express our creativity. Oh, there's a spiritual side. And of course, the connection part is very important to all of this. And I talked earlier about religion as a place where we can really get some of those connections. Not everybody goes to church every Sunday. There's what I like to call the spiritual side of this, where we're always kind everyone in a positive, friendly way. Think for a moment, if all of our state and national leaders just responded to everyone with respect. It's actually okay to disagree with somebody's policy. It's not okay to attack them personally. But we need to model it in our homes, our schools, and our community, which is just treating everybody with respect. And then our children will do the same thing. Embracing nature, very, very important. Modeling good values in terms of, think of it this way. The people in your life that are positive and encouraging. Think of those people right now. Seek out that person. And be that person for others. And then the last point up there, all those I can statements. But some of you have little children, okay? All right, what I just went over might be a little too complicated for a 7-year-old, but there it is. If he's 7 years old, he can draw a picture of eating healthy, helping others, being friendly, getting exercise. So I hope one enduring thing of this very difficult pandemic we all went through is just more awareness of the importance of self-care in our families and in our schools. There are 4 things in your home that you need to take charge of and walk up. The medicine cabinet, the liquor cabinet. I remember talking to Jill saying, the law's 21 in Texas, Jill. I will never look the other way. I will certainly never provide it. I will never condone alcohol for anyone under the age of 21. I might argue, I think it's the greatest problem in our country that's pretty much unaddressed is alcoholism. Take charge of the internet. Oh, did I leave any of them out? Medicine cabinet, liquor cabinet, gun cabinet, and the internet. All right, moving on again. Recognizing the developmental level, especially with regards to what your children will be exposed to through screens, television, movies, as well as video games. Don't hesitate to get professional help. I'm very impressed with the counseling available in this building. I'm sure they're very familiar with the best community providers as well. Reach out to the school to get help for your child. Okay, what can you actually do about screen time? Pay attention to the amount of time you spend on screen. You know, you can check that click to find out how many hours. Think about those technology-free times in your homes, especially the meal times. My favorite is when they're free and easy conversation around the table with everybody. Is it harder when kids are going back and forth between 2 homes? Absolutely is. But I remember us saying to Jill, Tuesday, Thursday, there's dinner at our house. And we'll all sit around that table. Free and easy conversation between kids and their parents. Don't be in a hurry. Try to slow this entire process down. And let them be little girls as long as possible. That would be my advice to all of you who have daughters. Family meetings to discuss technology usage. And what about Thursday night? We're not going to be on our screens. Maybe an old-fashioned board game. Just talk with your children. Set up some specific times when it'll be technology-free. And those of you who have teenagers, talk with them. Just ask simple questions and then primarily listen. You're hoping you can raise their awareness to being a little more intentional about how they use that technology. A little more mindful. Maybe setting a goal of doing some more outside activities and less time indoors on screen. So, Carnegie Foundation, we're coming to weighed in. They said, what do kids in America need for success? 3 or more significant adults in their lives besides their parents. That's actually pretty challenging. Sometimes just one. You know, one of the things I'm proudest to tell you? When I was 24, I signed up to be a big brother to Rodney in Muncie, Indiana. Rodney's African American. Rodney never knew his dad. Rodney and I have now been matched officially for 50 years. And just talked to him last week. And there are probably men in this room that could volunteer and become big brothers. You know what the waiting list is to get a big brother in virtually every city in America? Try 4 years. You know what the waiting list is to get a big sister? Try 4 months. Okay? One of my students the other day, she heard me talk about my relationship with Rod, and she said, I signed up. I'm going through all the background check, and I'm going to be a big sister in Broward. So, very important that we get more people, especially more men, to step forward, get involved, and stay involved in kids' lives. Sense of safety, security, and belonging in the home school and the community. That's one of the things the smaller schools do so well. And then organize activities for everybody. Not so many that they cause stress. I signed up to coach soccer during he was 5. Did I know anything about it? I did not. What was my goal? I wanted it to be fun. And I got parents involved. You know, I actually coached that team for 11 years. 9 kids played the entire 11 years. So just getting involved. It should really all be about having fun and developing relationships. We already talked about volunteerism, we talked about resiliency, and my final thought. Your kids are looking to you every day to see how to manage this challenging world we live in. Model calmness, coping, and hope. I hope as a result of tonight, you'll be a little bit more mindful of the impact of screens on your children. But you've had a lifetime. I mean, I've had many years to try to figure this all out. So please realize your kids, they may be struggling with a lot of issues, and find the right moments and don't say too much. I'm sure they really want to hear some of your ideas. You might even approach it along the lines of, you know, the world is so much different now. We talk about the world you live in, and I want to really get your perspective on all of this. I can always tell when I talk too much, all of a sudden the conversation's over. So there's kind of a bit of an art to like, that's an important one, okay? Hadn't thought about that. What else are you thinking, son? Your presence in your children's life is essential to their well-being and to their safety. And then I truly hope you will all go home tonight and just tell your children, yes, you are the child I've always dreamed of. So I'm going to take a few questions now, but I realize you're sitting on, might be a little uncomfortable. So that's just a couple questions, but I'm going to stay behind. And any questions that you want to email the administration, I will respond in writing to some of those questions. And who has a question tonight? And Franklin, you may have to kind of shout it out. I admit that I have a bit of a hearing problem. So.
Okay, I can be loud. So thank you for being here and addressing the issues of screen time at home and for children. I'm wondering if you have, and I'm Franklin Kennedy, I teach here, I've been here for a number of years. I know a lot of you, but not everyone. I taught a few of you too. Do you have any advice for schools themselves? We obviously deal with this on a daily basis, and we ourselves have seen a lot of changes over the years. Do you have anything, do you feel comfortable giving advice to us as a school community? You might not know our policies, but I'm just curious what you have to say.
So, few simple thoughts. Hopefully there could be a short article in the newsletter going out to every parent I also imagine that you're coming in for the fall parent-teacher conference with your second grader. I'm hoping, or a fourth grader, I'm hoping Jennifer might say, after they've gone over academics and behavior for Helena, maybe Jennifer would say to her parent, would you mind talking about screen time? And maybe a parent says, none of your business. But I think most parents would go, I'm kind of worried about that. What's actually appropriate for a fourth grader? Well, they're typically 9. Okay? So that would be 90 minutes. But you could cite recommendations from the American Medical Association. So what schools, I believe, need to do is bring this up. The parents shut it down, okay. But I think most parents, they don't know. They're actually really struggling with this. And you see this all the time. It's a restaurant. The kid's 4 years old. What's the first thing the parents do? So if we could rethink that a bit in our families, that we could actually talk together for a few moments. And that wouldn't be our first instinct. So basically, Franklin is like, bring it up and realize that there are a lot of people in schools with a lot of good information, and could we talk about some of these things? Could we work a few minutes into a program that's about something else? Maybe just a few minutes about student mental health. They could share the recommendations from the Surgeon General, for example. So just step out there a little bit and bring the topic up. Any other questions, comments? Yes, and please.
Hi, I'm a parent of a graduating third grader. So he's young enough where I can still have rules and he listens. But I have worries about the future. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I have worries about the future, the coming adolescence, and I'd like you mentioned the wait until 8th website, but one of my worries is, you have some recommendations for us as a family to keep working on things at home, but sometimes you feel like an island that's surrounded by chaos and peer pressure, and other people have different ideas about things than you do, and I still feel that is still a really big challenge. Do you have any other additional specifics other than waiting for 8?
So you brought up a very challenging scenario, and you used the phrase, you feel a little bit like an island. Now I think one of the things you can always be saying to your children is that our family decides. Remember my statement earlier about it can't be whether they're happy with you right at this moment. Maybe you can meet them halfway with what they're asking for and what you truly believe is best for them. But it's not easy. But trying to network and find those families that agree with your positions on some of these things. And as parents, we always need to remember we control things our kids want. And they need to work for those things. And one of the examples that came to mind was this kid wouldn't go to school at all. And he's a high school kid, and I went to the home to talk to them and finding out that, well, basically he pretty much stays up all night, sleeps through the school day, and what's he do after school? Well, he gets in his car and he drives to the mall and he hangs out with his friends. So I said like the obvious thing, which is, okay, no going to school, no car keys, okay? They turned to me and said, we can't do that. We're afraid of it. And I was sort of thinking, how did that happen, okay? Because that didn't happen overnight. It's like they needed some interventions very early on about boundaries, reward, you do these things, here are the rewards you get. But maybe this school will start a chapter of wait until 8th grade. Then one of the recommendations in Jonathan Haidt's book is basically no phones in school, period. Okay? And schools have to rethink that. But a lot of parents are going to be, but I want to be able to reach my kid, okay? But then you're going to respond with, the school is a very safe place. If there's an issue, we have landlines, okay? And so this is actually the challenge of our times, to figure out how to balance all of this. And just keep in mind the mental well-being for our children. Any other comments, questions? And I'll stay behind, but I want to thank everybody for their rapt attention. Okay.
I would have to know you were closing up.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead, shout it out if you would, please.
Okay, hey, I have a 15-year-old, we have a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old, but the 15-year-old, I'm pretty sure he's the only kid at Augusta Prep that doesn't have a cell phone, and he only gets 2 hours of video game, or computer time a night, and we are the worst parents in the world for that, because his friends get on when it's time for him to get off, and he does miss a lot of the social aspects. He doesn't text with his friends because he doesn't have a phone. He doesn't, if he's not playing video games, he can't talk to them. So I don't want him on the screen, but I also don't want to cut him off from his friends. I mean, I was on the phone with my friends all the time, not on the computer. So how do we make that a barrier? Like, how are we supposed to do that? Because he doesn't need a phone. He has a watch. He can call and text me. He can, you know what I mean?
So if you weren't so far away, I'd give you a high five. The other question would be, of course, how could parents that feel this way get a little more connected with each other? But you can certainly do everything possible to try to facilitate your child having face-to-face interaction, inviting friends over, going to their home after you've asked a lot of questions, but just try to make that in-person contact.
Or like invite more people over, bring them over, trash the house, whatever. And then he'll say, well, you know, nobody wants to come over here because they all want to play video games and I can't play video games. So then he's like, now nobody wants to be my friend. And then I feel horrible because I don't want to make him, I don't want to exclude him on purpose. So we feel stuck a lot.
I think talking with him, and maybe there's a bit of a compromise here, and maybe it's limited video games, and making sure that he doesn't start to consume his entire life. The literature is really clear. For girls, it's all about social media time and communicating with others, and unfortunately, a lot of those communications are not very nice. For boys, it's all about the gaming time. But it's like, what's a reasonable amount? Maybe you can meet him in the middle and figure out some combination of more in-person time, more outdoors time, and limited gaming time. Thank you all for your attendance tonight.